So if you've been following my videos for a while, you're probably already familiar with this bike here. This is the bike that I call my green machine. So I've had my green machine for over 5 years now, and I've used it a lot for bike commuting around the city, as well as taking it on a few trips with me over the years. So earlier in the summer I was doing a simple inner tube repair, so I had my back wheel off, and when I was done with that and I was putting my wheel back on, I was tightening up the wheel bolt with my ratchet handle here, and as I was doing that I suddenly heard a big crack, and when I looked in there I could see that my frame unfortunately cracked in these two locations right here where my rear dropout is. So I'm really not sure what exactly it was that caused this to fracture. You will notice that my frame was quite rusty, so it's possible that corrosion did play some kind of a role in that. Another thing which may have been a factor is that many times over the years when I've been riding this bike, I have broken the rear axle, and of course replaced it many times. But when you have a broken axle on your bike, what happens is, this shaft here is broken somewhere in the middle. So if you continue to ride on this bike, then the shaft is really only being supported from the one side, and it could cause this area here to bend inward. There were a few times that I broke an axle and rode for a few more minutes, so I just had to get to where I was going, which is really not something that you should do. But I never noticed that this area here was bent or anything. I never had to bend it back or anything, so I'm really not sure whether that was the cause of it either. The unusual thing is that, as I said, it broke when I was just tightening up this wheel nut. It didn't fail when the bike was actually being ridden. So I imagine that it's probably possible that I could take my bike to some kind of a welding shop and they could repair that small area there and fix those two cracks, and then I'd be able to continue using my green machine. But given that the bike is already in pretty rough shape, it's already pretty badly corroded, I decided that it's probably more feasible just to find a frame for a bike which is really similar to the green machine and make a new green machine instead. So here's the bike that I decided to buy. And as you can see, it's very, very similar to my existing green machine. The frame has almost exactly the same dimensions. The only difference is that this tube here is about ½ an inch shorter than on my original green machine. This one's actually already been painted green, so it of course looks like a green machine already. So I bought this bike for $45 used through a website called Craigslist, which is a listing service, and the person that I bought it from was not the original owner of it, and as you can see, there's not even any decals on it from the original manufacturer. He wasn't sure exactly what the age of the bike was, or even what the maker model was, something that I'd be interested in, but of course I don't need to know. Based on the serial number, I believe it's a 1995 bike, so it's 20 years old already. But what I like about this bike is the dimensions of it are so similar to my green machine, which always seem to fit me really well, so I think this bike should be the same. I also like that the tubing is really thin on it, so although it's a steel frame bike, it's not a really heavy steel frame bike. Another reason why I chose this frame is because it has this style of brakes, which are the center pull kind, where there's there's two brake arms on either side, and then there's a cable which pulls from the top to actuate the brakes. Although I'm not specifically a fan of this style of brakes, what I like about them is that they mount from this, this bracket which is down here, which is part of the frame. The style of brakes that I actually prefer for a commuting bike are this style here, which are called V-brakes, and they're kind of similar to those center pull brakes, except the cable comes across the top like that. But what's similar between them is they both use this same mounting hole down here for mounting, so I should be able to take a pair of V-brakes and put them on this bike here. So another thing that I was looking for when I was in the market for a new frame was a frame that had this bracket which goes across the back here and is welded to these two supports back here, and it's got holes in it, and that's what's used for mounting the rack that I have my milk crate on. This is kind of an older style of rack and an older style of bike, and a lot of newer bikes don't have this plate here, and they use a different method for mounting the rack on. Now of course I could have always just replace my rack with a new rack, but this rack is already really well set up with the milk crate. It's all attached there. It's also got the rear light on there, so it would have been just easiest to just take this thing right off and just put it on a new bike. So unfortunately my new green machine does not have that plate there. It's just got this one bar across here, so there's not going to be anywhere for me to mount that existing rack in, but I think I should be able to make some kind of an adapter, so I'll still be able to use my existing rack. So after I finished filming that last clip there, I then took apart both bikes and basically moved all the good parts from the old green machine onto the frame for my new green machine. I kind of just put things together as quickly as possible just so I could take it out for a test ride. So I did that, and I was really happy with the result. Riding the new green machine felt just the same as riding the old green machine. So now I had some added confidence that this new frame was going to work for me, so I could proceed with the project. So I took all of the parts back off of my new frame, and here you can see I have my new green machine frame sitting on top of my old green machine, which shows you how similar those two frames were. So after I'd stripped off all the parts from the frame, I brought the frame down to the basement of my building where there's a do-it-yourself car wash, and I proceeded to wash the frame to get it as clean as possible to prepare it for paint. While I was down there, I decided to also wash a few of the other parts of the bike just so that it would be clean when I assembled the final product. So after I figured out what size and font I used for the lettering on my original green machine, I printed off a page of sticky labels with all of those same letters again, so I could use those on my new green machine. Then I loaded everything back into my bike trailer and rode my bike to a local park, which is what I used for my painting booth. I started by painting everything black, and as that paint was drying, I carefully cut around all the letters that I had printed off. I then masked off most of the sections of the frame where the letters are going to go, with the exception of some small boxes. Then using some red spray paint, I filled in these boxes with red. After letting the red paint dry, I proceeded to stick the paper labels on my frame, and then painted the entire frame in my familiar emerald green color. For this frame, I used Krylon Rust Protector, which hopefully should hold up a little bit better to the salty roads in the winter. I then peeled off all of my sticky labels, and here you can see my old frame sitting beside my new frame, and the only real difference is the new one has a red number 2 in the label. Over the next few days, I carefully installed all of the parts onto the frame, and here you see the final product. So I've had this bike up and running for about a month and a half now. It's just taken me a while to get around to finishing this video. So here's how I ended up tackling the problem of not having this bracket here. Basically, I just took a metal plate and drilled 3 holes in it. So this hole down here is the hole that corresponds to this here. So I basically just got this piece of metal bolted to the frame here, and then I've got my rack bolted on there. So another unique thing that I did on this bike was that I used the existing forks that I had on my old green machine, but the problem was the frame for my old green machine had quite a long section of tubing that went here, which meant that these forks stick up quite a bit higher. You know, this tube that comes up through here is quite a bit longer than it needs to be, and rather than trimming it and making it shorter, I actually wanted that extra height because that extra height allows me to have my handlebars a little bit higher for a little bit more comfort ride for me. So all I had to do was I just got a whole bunch of these little spacers, and I filled in that gap between the cone that goes down here and the nut which goes there on the top. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching and seeing how I created my green machine number 2. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of this video, and thanks for watching.